So, JD, you're the CEO of Raygun. You have an application performance monitoring platform, and I was using it for an iPhone application that I have. I put the site live, I put the backend live, I put the application in the App Store, and I went to bed. And the next day, I woke up with an email from Raygun about a certain number of my users were experiencing a certain thing, and they were experiencing it just in India. And it was like an AI. It was like some person could tell me about my site's performance. But this was like 5 years ago. Have you been using AI all this time?
It looks that way, but no, but we've been making a lot of improvements. One of the philosophies behind how we've built Raygun is that I've always wanted it to feel like it was a virtual team member, that it was somebody carrying the load for you and working while you were asleep. And I think we're making more and more progress on that. And I'm really excited about some of the things we're going to be able to do with these newer AI tools to make that even more powerful for our customers.
Absolutely fantastic. I really enjoy using Raygun. It gives me a lot of instant visibility and insight into what's happening into my code. If you're listening, you can have this experience too. You can sign up for a free trial at raygun.com. Hi, I'm Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today, I have the pleasure of chatting with Leonard Tramiel. He was involved in the early days of the personal computer and video game industry, working on the Commodore PET, as well as the Atari ST and TT line of computers and the Atari Jaguar. He has his PhD in physics from Columbia University, and lately has been helping young people understand science and critical thinking. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for a wonderful introduction.
I appreciate that. So, I have done now over 900 interviews, from actors to computer people to Michio Kaku, the physicist, and not until now have I been all in my head about what to ask people. I am thrilled to be chatting with you and absolutely overwhelmed because you have this wonderful position of being a part of history. What does that feel like? You're here in a world of AR and VR, and the AI thing has happened in the last 6 months, over the last 20 years. What does that feel like? Is this the future you were promised?
It is certainly not the future I was promised. It's pretty much the future I expected, with some disappointments, and a few things that turned out better than I had expected. But unlike most people these days, I don't see today's world as all that different than 50 years ago. It's still populated by people, and people haven't changed. People are simultaneously wonderful, creative, dynamic, amazing, and incredibly flawed and prone to cognitive errors and all sorts of ways to have your thinking go bad. And we're people, and we have been for millennia.
I was talking to a gentleman at work about my concerns around AI, and he said, computers are supposed to be like Iron Man's suit, not like the Terminator. And I thought that was a really cool analogy. Like, it's meant to augment me and make me better. It's not supposed to be the thing that stands next to me and then potentially in society. When you were making early computers, were you thinking about them in terms of augmenting people?
Me, not so much. Chuck Peddle, absolutely.
Yeah.
The first time I met Chuck was one of the strangest conversations I've ever had.
Chuck Peddle, for our folks that are listening, the designer of the MOS Technology 6502 microprocessor.
Yeah. The conversation was instigated by my father, who had been told by Chuck, I'm going to make a personal computer. If you want Commodore to sell it, then I'll do it for you. Otherwise, I'll quit the company and do it on my own. But I'm making a personal computer. And my father was a rather amazing gentleman. He had a 4th grade education. I like to joke that my parents were illiterate in 3 languages. And he had no knowledge of anything technical. The most technical thing he was ever able to do was repair manual typewriters. And he was trained to do that by the US Army. And that is, in fact, where Commodore started. So Dad had no idea whether this personal computer thing was a good idea. So he said, Leonard, come with me. We're going to meet Chuck. Tell me whether or not what he's saying is full of shit or not. So went down to some embedded computer thing where Chuck was showing the microprocessor development terminal, a really quite wonderful development platform for the 6502. And we had a discussion about a Robert Heinlein short story called The Door into Summer, a time travel story where the hero traveled into the future into a world that was filled with computers. Everything had a computer in it, and it was there to make your life easier. And he wanted to live in that world. And in order to live in that world, people had to be comfortable with computers. In order to be comfortable with computers, you have to have inexpensive, easy to use computers. And to do that, you have to have a really powerful but inexpensive microprocessor. And that was the motivation for the 6502. The 6502 was done. It was a success. He wanted to go on to the next step, and that became the PET computer.
So when you're driving back with your dad, you go, oh yeah, that's happening. We need to get a part of that. Or what did you say?
I said, that sounds like a really good idea. I think Chuck's got something there.
So you were your dad's BS detector.
I was occasionally used as a technical consultant.
That's a very, very good way of expressing it. Now, you love computers, but you also love astrophysics. And you did that in school. How did you bridge the two? How did you bridge the two worlds?
I'm not sure what you mean by bridge the two worlds.
Well, like for me, let me put it this way. I went to school and I thought I was going to do computer science, but I found it very abstract. So instead I did a software engineering degree. And I thought it was interesting that you went and did a PhD in physics, but then a large part of the early part of your life was spent doing computers and software. Some people might think that those things are quite separate. I guess it's okay to love two things at once.
So I went from the other direction. I have been fascinated by astronomy and astrophysics since the third grade. My older brother brought home a book from the school library. People may still remember that libraries are a thing and schools have them or had them. And he left this book on the kitchen table. I read it. It was all about the sun, the moon, and the stars. And I thought this was the most amazing stuff I had ever heard of. And I don't know, maybe it was just a lack of creativity, but I have been interested primarily in astronomy and astrophysics since then. And I was in the third grade, let's just say a long time ago. But yeah, so I had this opportunity to work at Commodore. I had worked there for a couple of summers during college. When I got my bachelor's in physics, I just went to work for Dad. My first job there was as process engineer in their liquid crystal display manufacturing facility. And then the whole Commodore PET thing started, and I started working on that. And after a year, we had the product. We had basically the thing done, not manufactured in volume yet. But I was still too curious about the universe and went off and got a PhD in physics because I wanted to learn more.
Interesting. So the passion for for PCs, for computers, the way that Chuck Peddle had it, you had the enthusiasm, but you did still have your love in astrophysics, and that's like your first love.
Yeah, I look at computers as tools, and I think that the incredible power of programming, the idea that you can take this thing and bend it completely to your will, although it resists horribly, is pretty amazing. The ability to process information is spectacular, and I wish more people wanted to do it.
I had a computational astrophysicist on the show a couple of weeks ago, and I guess I knew in part of my brain that that was a thing. But she basically writes C code all day against supercomputers in order to figure out the ejecta of binary star systems. And she just it wouldn't. That's not a job that would have been possible before because she just needed more compute. She's throwing it at giant refrigerators in the cloud in order to
Yep.
figure these
Yeah.
things out. And that's unbelievable.
I've done a little bit of research prior to this discussion as well, so I heard that one.
what do you think about that? I mean, the juxtaposition between 64K of memory or even 4K of memory and the kind of work that's happening in that space is overwhelming. It's bigger than the brain can comprehend.
Oh, the amount of computation available to astrophysicists today is just astonishing. We can do things that were completely impossible before.
Yeah. I wonder if that's ever going to be available on the desktop.
Well, there's already more computation ability available on the desktop than the vast majority of people will ever use. So
just idle CPU waiting out there to be used.
Yeah. I mean, right now, my computer is sitting at essentially idle.
Yeah, which is funny because I just built a computer, as you know, last week with my buddy, and I'm sitting here with 5, gigahertz of potential, 32 processors, and we're at like 3%. So I'm feeling a little bad about that.
I'm at 1 or 2, and it's plugging along, and when we stop, it will start running some BOINC processes and running it at 50 or 60% for the times when I'm not on the machine.
Okay, so then here's a loaded question. Should I be running SETI at home?
You can't. SETI at home
I know.
no longer exists.
Was it a good idea, and did anything come of it?
Lots of things came of it. It was a great idea, but no, we did not find any ETs.
Oh, shoot. That sucks. I was hoping we were going to find them.
You would have known about it. Yeah, you would have known. Yeah, one of the things that I've gotten involved in since my retirement is, in fact, the SETI Institute. So I'm on one of their advisory boards. I think they do great work.
Yeah, you've been on the Council of Advisors of the SETI Institute for some time.
Yeah.
That's great. Let me back up 50 years for a second because I wanted to ask about one of the things that you're known for when you were quite young. You worked on PETSCII, the PET Standard Code of Information Exchange, which is an offshoot of ASCII, the American Standard Code for Information Exchange, specifically the 1963 version of ASCII, I understand. How did you get assigned a task like that? Is it a summer and someone says, hey, we need a character model and we need some graphics inside of the characters? How did someone hand you that task?
So Chuck had a very clear idea of the hardware architecture of the machine, and he wanted it to be able to do graphics, but knew that he could not afford to have a bit-mapped frame buffer, just too much memory involved. So 1 byte per character instead of having 64 bits for each thing. So he wanted a graphics character set. So I was the low man on the totem pole with the fewest technical chops. And he said, "Okay, we have 256 elements that can go into each thing on the screen. We'll use 1 bit to reverse every dot. So that leaves you with 128. There's a bunch for letters and numbers and punctuation. Fill the rest with useful things. Oh, and by the way, I want to play blackjack, so we need the 4-car suits." And that was it. That was the instruction.
Did the keyboard, were you also involved in the keyboard layout? Who decided that, the suits of the cards go in the lower left corner of the keyboard and things like that?
I'm pretty sure I had nothing to do with that, but I don't remember explicitly. I wish that we had put a little bit more thought into it. When we added upper and lowercase, that got rid of some of the graphics characters, and I wish we had arranged the setup so that that transition wasn't as destructive as it turned out to be. Still worked out pretty well, but
it did. Yeah, it is surprisingly has a lot of longevity. I was on a PETSCI-based BBS over Telnet with a Commodore 64 just last week. Did you know that they're still out there?
I did know they're still out there. One of the things I'd love to be able to be a, I don't know, trans-dimensional fly on the wall somewhere and be involved in the discussions that went into the design of the original IBM PC character set. They have a bunch of box and line drawing characters, which look an awful lot like mine. And I'm wondering if they were inspired by, to use a polite term, or if they were just, parallel evolution. There aren't all that many ways you can do box drawing characters. But yeah, that was fun. I think it worked out nicely. Took a long time, lots of graph paper, lots of drawing by hand. But when I got to the
graph
point,
paper was my question.
Graph paper is a wonderful invention, and when I got to the point where I could draw a really nice Starship Enterprise and a lunar lander, thought, okay, I've got something here.
Oh, see, now you just tickled my brain by pulling Lunar Lander out of the archives there. Oh my goodness. What do you feel about the presence of such intense nostalgia right now? I know that retro gaming, retro arcades, retro this and that have always been a thing, but as I am now 50, I am just feeling it so much, and I'm spending a lot of time thinking about those things and finding other people who are, doing emulators, doing ROMs, building physical. I on Thursday this week, I have the Portland Commodore 64 group. There's PET groups. There's Atari ST groups. I just picked up an ST on Facebook Marketplace. Should I just give up the past?
I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. If it gives you joy, without channeling Marie Kondo too much. If it makes you happy and you get satisfaction out of it, go for it. I don't understand it. I have a Commodore PET on the other side of the room, actually 2 of them.
Okay.
I still have the machine that I wrote my PhD thesis on, which is a Commodore SX64, the luggable portable 64. None of those machines have been turned on in decades. They're there. They're fun to look at, but I don't have any great need to have them operating. I look at things like the Atari Jaguar, which I still have a couple. Again, they haven't been turned on in ages, but it's interesting what we managed to do with the technology available at the time. It's kind of cool. There's an interesting intellectual challenge of what can you make this do given what its limitations are in conjunction with the current level of technology driving your desires. And I think that they come off pretty well. But I don't see any reason to personally to restrict myself to the actual hardware or emulations thereof.
Speaking of pushing the limits, were you aware, and when were you aware of the demo scene and the amount of people at the time that were pushing Ataris and Commodores to the limits and trying to see what they could squeeze out of them? And even now, there are demo scene people trying to do as much as they can in a single K. It seems like constraints, like the 6502, really was constrained, but it was genius, but it was still constrained, and people pushed it and pushed it and pushed it as hard as they could.
Yeah, I was essentially unaware of it at the time. Had more mundane ideas and concerns, but the things that those people have managed to do is just amazing. Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
What do you think about the proliferation of like ROMs and emulators? And is that stealing intellectual property, or is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is that a part of computer history that we should do the best we can to freely make available if it's abandonware? Where does that gray market kind of draw the line for you?
I don't think there's any question that it's theft of intellectual property. The question is whether or not it's wrong is another question. I think it's strictly illegal, but I don't think that in most cases there's anyone actually being harmed because it is, as you put it, abandonware. You couldn't buy it now if you tried. No one said, no one that actually has legal ownership is selling it, so it doesn't really matter. At decades ago, when there were people that were trying to sell it, and it wasn't, it was called software piracy, as it should have been. I was pretty much against it, but now I don't see that it really hurts anybody.
Are there any things in computing that you are surprised we have not seen yet, that you expected fully would happen but have not yet happened?
Nothing expansive. Excuse me. There's one thing that we did on the desktop of the TT and ST that I'm shocked doesn't exist in any other in any current implementation of a graphics interface. So one of the reasons that people will drop down to the command line when they know how to is to get a list of every file in this directory that has these letters and this extension, and it gives you you just do a directory listing with those wildcards in it. But you can't do that from the desktop. But you could on the ST. You could click on the name text field, and a field would pop up. You would type in the wildcards, and it would filter. I thought that was great. And it's just not available. Gee, if there was only someone from Microsoft who could hear this and possibly implement such a thing.
It's funny. I actually know literally the guy, and this is the thing that's so funny about. I've been joking with my wife about being an old person in tech and realizing that the superpower of being of a certain age in tech is simply longevity. And in doing that, you meet people, you collect people, you know them, and you build relationships, so that at some point someone can say, "I wish that was a thing," and then you can get 3 or 4 people on the horn and actually do it. And when I'm trying to grow new young people in tech, the trick is to make them stick around. and build relationships so that they also too can become old people in tech and then build the next generation. So I know exactly who to call. I will give him a call after this and make that
I don't know
happen.
if you've ever used that facility in TOS, but I thought it was a great idea. I forget who came up with it,
Yeah.
but we added it in. That was an Atari edition, did not come from
Mhm.
DRI, and I wish I could do that on in Linux or on my Windows 11 machine.
Well, take a look at Microsoft Power Toys, the new Power Toys. If you
Right?
haven't already, it basically adds all these little perfect things, little paper cuts that bother you about the operating system.
Yeah,
That's our place to play.
I haven't looked at it recently, but I do have. Well, I did until I rebuilt my machine. Have Power
Oh,
Toys
yeah.
installed. I don't think it's actually on the machine that I'm currently using, just because I haven't cut myself on one of those little jagged edges recently.
Indeed, indeed. Now, you mentioned Atari TOS, which canonically is the operating system, but there's rumor that it's the Tramiel operating system. Is
No,
that true or not?
definitely the operating system.
Okay.
Yeah,
No Easter egg there.
no Easter egg there. We in the discussions at DRI, we just kept saying the operating system, the operating system, the operating system, and it just got shortened to TOS,
And it just stuck. It
and
just
it
stuck.
stuck. Yeah.
Are there any Easter eggs out there that you're particularly excited about or proud of?
Well, I couldn't tell you, could I?
Oh, that's a good point. You're waiting for us to dig them up?
There are none that I know of. Well, in TOS, I won't give you a hint. In TOS, there is a bit of code that never executes. It is constructed with a legitimate assembler, but if you look at the ASCII output of the assembled machine code, it spells out someone's love for someone else. And it was put in there by that person. And we found it. And I went slightly ballistic. There was so much crunching that had to go into getting the operating system to fit into the tiny little ROMs that we used. And I'm very tempted to give the person's name, but I won't. But and there were very few women that were involved in the programming of this, so that tells you nothing. That pronoun. He said, "If you ever need the space, I'll take this out, but let me know, and I'll crunch to make up for it. But if that doesn't work, absolutely remove it." And we never did.
That's nice. There's a digital, it's like a scratching on the so-and-so loves so-and-so on a tree, but it's digital.
Exactly. And I remember exactly what it says, but I'm not going to tell you.
Oh,
And I don't think anyone's found it, but it might be there. Maybe someone has, and I just haven't noticed the announcement.
that's lovely. Well, hopefully we'll find out when someone listens to this. Not an Easter egg, but a little piece of joy, because you mentioned joy. I think the Atari ST was known for a MIDI interface and was very well thought of in the music production space, certainly much more than computers of the era. With those are conscious decisions. There was an intentionality to decisions like that. How does a
Oh,
decision like
absolutely.
that get made?
So the guy that was in charge of the hardware specification of the machine, Shiraz Shivji, thought that MIDI was a wonderful thing at two levels. One was the ability to do what MIDI was designed to do, which was control musical instruments. And the other is it was a nice networking interface, and you could attach all sorts of stuff that way. And both of those both of those implementations or instantiations, to sound object oriented, got used. So lots of people did a lot of music work on the Atari ST. There were groups that called themselves an ST group. Their instrument was the Atari ST, which was a phrase we had never thought would exist. And then we had some games that did their communications through MIDI. A very early maze chasing game called MIDI Maze, where you would network machines together and run around. And I think the game was called something like Kill a Happy Face, because there was a ball with a happy face that you would go around and shoot. First person shooter of a very early variety.
Oh my goodness. And what a prescient thing though, that like how many different specifications like that are still around today and still being thought about today, as as I look around for USB serial port adapters and adapters to adapters to adapters.
Yeah, that was so. Shiraz is a clever guy, and I think that decision was even more successful than he had hoped.
That's cool. I'm sitting here with 11 tabs open, and I've read 3 different books, and I'm trying to make sure that I ask educated questions. So forgive me if I ask poor ones. But I understand that Microsoft was courting Atari to try to sell Windows as an operating system for the ST, and that you met with them, but Windows was not yet. It wasn't quite there. Like it didn't align. Why did that not happen?
So there were really only 2 people that we went to. The first was Digital Research, and they were in the process of developing their graphics environment manager, or GEM.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went up to Microsoft, and Windows was a rumored thing, but not quite out yet. And we described what we wanted to do, and they said, "Yeah, we can do that, but we can't meet your timescale." This was summer of 1984, and late 1984. No, yeah, summer of 84, and we wanted to show it at the January 1985 Consumer Electronics Show, which we did. And they said, "We cannot meet that." And I asked why, and they said, "Well, right now it's running on an Intel machine, and it'll take longer than that to port it." And I went, "Is it written in assembler, or is it written in a high-level language? I assume it's in C." And they said, "Yes, it is written in C, but the way things are coded at Microsoft, it is a custom version of C that compiles down to architecture-specific microcode and then interpreted in real time to assembly or machine code. So we have to redo all of the code, not only the interpreter and the P code compiler, but the custom level of the language." And I went internally, "What the?" But that's the way everything at Microsoft was done. I think up until NT.
I wonder. I'm just imagining the alternative future where things went a different direction, and like a version of Black Mirror or one of these Netflix shows where,
right,
if things had aligned, would that have been a good thing or a bad thing? It seems like everything happened as it should have.
Well, Windows, the first few implementations of Windows were lacking in many ways. I think GEM.
Rough.
Yeah, you don't want to know what other terms I was thinking.
It's okay. This show is my side hustle. I don't need the job, so you're welcome to speak however you want.
No, I'm just being polite. When you compared Windows to GEM at the time, GEM just absolutely blew it away.
Yeah,
and I'm glad we went the way we did. We got all of the arbitrary file name, things, file lengths, extensions, all that happened from the get-go. All of the limitations, FAT16 and the like, were not an issue. So that all worked out nicely.
That's awesome. So you retired in your mid 40s. Is that correct, sir?
42, which of
42,
course,
that's lovely.
according to Douglas Adams, is the right age to do everything.
That is the perfect age to do everything. And I understand that you taught 8th grade for a while. Is that correct?
Not officially, because of my interest in astronomy and in science education. I joined something called Project Astro, a program of the Astronomical Society of the Pacific. And through that was paired up with 8th grade science teachers to go forth and teach science literacy through astronomy. And I did that for many years until the California science standards changed, and that wasn't a good fit. And I now volunteer up at the Chabot Space and Science Center and teach basic science literacy through astronomy up there.
I know that it's a different kind of fun. I was going to say, is that the most fun that you have? Like, what do you find to be the most fun? Because that's been my dream as well. I've said it very many times publicly that when I'm done at Microsoft, I'll go and teach high school science. So I just think it's cool that you're like a time shifted version of me and you seem very happy and chill. So I'm looking forward to that.
It's great. I like to challenge myself intellectually. I like to get asked questions and put in situations where I'm completely unprepared. I was up at the observatory one day, and there's this just adorable 5-year-old who's got, a severe case of motor mouth, but incredibly curious, astonishingly knowledgeable, and just asking questions and running around. And he, caught my attention, and he's sitting on his mom's lap and asking questions. And his mom says, "Honey, here's a good opportunity to ask that question that you've been wondering about. Why don't you ask this gentleman?" And the kid goes, "I don't know. It's not a really good question." And I said, "Come on, go for it." And he said, "How does gravity work in a black hole?" This is a 5-year-old. How the hell can you answer that question? I mean, it's hard enough to explain how gravity works, and then how gravity works in a black hole, and then doing it to a 5-year-old. That was fun. I enjoyed the hell out of that.
I hope you pulled it off. Like, did you make it happen?
I think so. I mean, I did not get into Riemannian geometry and tensor calculus for rather obvious reasons, but he was happy, and that was good. One of the most fun things I get to do, besides playing with my grandkids, is up at Chabot, they have 2 vintage refractors, a 20-inch refracting telescope built in 1915, and an 8-inch refractor built by Alvin Clark and Sons in 1883. They are completely manually controlled, and I get to operate them. And there's something just astonishingly satisfying about grabbing, 5 tons of priceless scientific artifact using mechanisms that were built more than a century ago and pointing the telescope so that you can see a star during the day. It's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
And no computers involved.
And no computers. Yeah, totally analog.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I thank you so much for your time. I'm sure I could abuse your time and talk to you for another hour. This has been an absolute joy. I want to tell you that I put the word out on social media that I was going to chat with you today, looking for questions and thoughts and some insight. More than questions, there was an overwhelming thank you, and I wanted to pass that along from our friends.
Thank you so much.
You, your family, your brother, your dad, the folks that are involved and the folks around you, you just did so much for us and we appreciate that. And I love that you are paying it forward with the young people and getting them excited about science.
Yeah, I gave a talk at the Computer History Museum for Vintage Computer Festival West about my adventures trying to uncover the original Commodore wooden PET prototype, which we did eventually find, which was thrilling. And the Q&A was, as always, the most interesting part because I already know what's in my talk. And someone asked me, what did I think was Commodore's contribution to the personal computer business? Because there's no question that there would be a personal computer business if Commodore had not gotten into it. If I had come back from that meeting about the Door into Summer with Chuck and said, this guy's a crackpot, don't bother, and Chuck had left, how would things be different? There would still be personal computers. The primary contribution was my dad's relentless drive to reduce cost and limit competition as a result, wound up with an enormous number of people being able to buy computers, have them, and have a background. So when the industry was ready and needed large numbers of people, they were available. I think that's mostly what we did.
That really resonates. I apologies for centering this on myself, but I will tell you a story in closing here that will agree with what you just said. My dad was a firefighter. My mom was a zookeeper, and I was the first one to go to college. I came home when I was 12 one day, and the family van was a 1970 Ford Econoline was gone. And I asked my dad, where's the van? And he said that your teacher said that you're pretty good with the computer. So we went to Sears and we bought you a Commodore, but we had to sell the van to do it.
Oh my God.
That moment I talk about publicly very often because it showed a commitment on the part of the school district, on the teachers to have a computer in the room, my dad to listen to the teacher and trust her, and then to make a commitment to sell the vehicle that we needed in order to buy this computer. And that kept me off the streets, in the basement. And when it was time, that access, it's about access. It's about access, giving kids access to information. And you're absolutely right. And if it was, how else would they have gotten the $300 to buy the computer?
Yeah, the number of times that people have come up to me when they either recognize me or much more likely my last name and say something along the lines of, thank you, you gave me my life, which is kind of disturbing. Because no, I didn't, but I think I know what you mean. That's pretty nice. It's a little weird, but it's a good feeling to have made a positive contribution to society in general and to individuals' lives.
Thank you very much, sir. We've been chatting with Leonard Tramiel, and this has been another episode of Hansel Minutes. We'll see you again next week.